This content is being brought to you by the Bourbon Real Talk American Whiskey Aroma Kit. This is a tool that I put together to help all you whiskey aficionados out there develop your palates. You can sit down with the vials and train your senses, or you can sit down with a great dram and break that whiskey down to its components. If you have any interest in purchasing a kit of your own, head on over to bourbonrealtalk.com/shop and pick one up. Thank you for listening.
Hello, everybody out there in Bourbon Real Talk land. Randy Sullivan coming to you with what might be my most special bourbon-related interview of all time. I'm here with Danny, the Master Distiller of 1792, and I am pretty excited about that. Thank you for coming on the show, sir.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
So we're coming out here. We're going to do a barrel selection today.
Yes.
For Loyalty Liquor and Someone Say Whiskey. Looks like we're going to have a 1792 full proof coming out, so be on the lookout for that.
Good luck with that selection.
Yeah, we are very excited. And you actually have something special for us to drink on the show today. So we've got this 12-year age 1792.
Yes, it just dawned on me though, tasting this prior to selection may not be the best idea.
Oh, we're experts. We're experts. Don't worry about it.
Would you like to try some now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so let people take a look at this. I think this is not readily available right now. We ended up bottling about 1,400 bottles total. Mm-hmm. And it went pretty quick.
That's good.
And it was not in all states. And I'm going to pour myself a little bit as well. Okay.
Yeah. It's got great color. What's the proof on this?
This comes in at 96.6.
Okay. And
so this is a fresh open bottle. So a little bit of breathing time will bring out some really interesting stuff.
Yeah. Are you a big believer of the one drop of mineral water kind of a thing, or do you just like to let it breathe in the glass? How do you like to do it?
I like to taste it as is, but I also like to dilute. And I'll tell you, when we are tasting in-process samples, we will do a couple things. We'll taste them at barrel strength.
Okay.
We'll taste them at the proof that we're going to release it at. But prior to that point, we also dilute them to 40 or 50 proof. Not that that's an enjoyable way to drink bourbon, but it brings out a lot of flavors that you would otherwise not get.
Right.
So it gives some clues and some insights as to what's going on in the bourbon, and it really helps us understand how we did, what we're doing, what we need to do. So that's a really important part.
Better be able to identify a flaw at that lower proof.
Absolutely.
Okay, gotcha.
A flaw, but also something that's unique.
Right.
It just helps open it up, and it just helps you separate components a little better.
Yeah. So I am getting just a ton of caramelized wood sugar flavors out of this, like butterscotch and caramel, vanilla.
There's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
Below that, I'm getting a lot of a compound called a lactone.
Okay.
The toasted coconut.
Yeah.
And that is not something that comes out in our bourbons until they get to a certain point or in some other rare conditions.
Sure.
But also what is behind the caramel, behind the spiciness from the oak, behind the coconut, I'm getting a lot of really ripe stone fruits.
Okay.
And that's, to me, what makes an aged bourbon special. The characters that come out with a long, slow aging process. There's a little bit, as you lose alcohol, as you lose water, you also enter oxygen. And that oxygen has effects on the bourbon that come through over time. The oxidation of certain acids, of certain esters, provide this complexity.
So I get cherry on a lot of your whiskeys. I also get banana, which that's the joke about me. You don't know this about me. But David Whitmer over at MGPI, when he met me, he gave me a bag of banana runts because I'm just known for tasting bananas. And I have done some research, and there are certain fermentation conditions and some yeast strains add to that isoamyl acetate component. And so I don't know, is that something that you guys target for your whiskey, or?
So I'm not sure it's something that we are saying we want this. It's part of our profile.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. Our yeast do produce a noticeable quantity of isoamyl acetate, and that is what makes bananas smell like bananas.
Right.
Now, it's not overpowering. A lot of people don't get it, but what's really cool, and I think this is one of the things that make our bourbon unique, because we do produce a little isoamyl acetate, you mix that with the aging, you get a little caramel, you get a little bit of butterscotch, and every once in a while I'll hear somebody describe our bourbon as bourbon or a banana foster.
Right, banana foster, yeah.
Which is, I've never made, I probably should, so I know what I'm talking about. But when you cook a banana in a little butter, a little sugar, maybe a little alcohol, and you caramelize it.
Caramelize those
so
sugars.
So you think about the caramelized sugars, which are what we're getting out of our oak barrel aging process. And the amyl acetate from the banana, as I say, that's spot on.
Spot on.
So absolutely, we do have a little bit of amyl acetate in our bourbon.
Yeah, one of the Kentucky Master Distillers famously got angry at me for saying I tasted bananas in his whiskey. And he said, "This isn't Jack Daniels, get this guy out of here." And I was like, I like a little banana in my whiskey.
Well, so some yeast strains produce more than others, and fermentation conditions will have an impact on that.
Sure. I hear higher fermentation temps can sometimes produce more.
Generally speaking, higher temperatures produce more fruity esters.
Okay.
But on the other hand, when you have higher temperatures, you're also volatilizing more of the fruits and more of the aromas.
Gotcha.
So there's a balance between how much you're making, how much you're losing.
Sure.
And that's one of the things that I monitor. That's one of the things that we do in our process to make sure we're hitting our profile.
Well, and let me say, people, walking to Danny's office, I was like a kid in a candy store. Like, we literally went all the way up. We're looking at the still. We're seeing the fermentation tanks. You can't see this, but right over here, there's a computer monitor that looks like I don't know what they're tracking, but there's lots of squiggly lines. This is all very exciting. I feel like I'm in the nerve center of 1792, right?
Well, that's a still startup.
Okay.
So you see where not much is happening, and then we got a lot of lines, and we're tracking flow rates and temperatures and reflux rates and stuff like that. So it's kind of the cool, geeky science stuff.
Well, you are so personable. I feel like I don't need questions to do the interview, but I will try to stay on topic because we only have a limited amount of time. He has a big distillery to run, and we've got a barrel to pick. And so one of the things I wanted to ask is kind of your history in getting into bourbon, because you're a whiskey drinker too, right?
Yes,
You don't just make it.
Yes.
And so was this something that was like always part of your upbringing and you were around it, or did you discover it later in life?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I have been I'm not like a lot of your fans. When I say I'm a collector, I'm more of a drinker, a taster.
Right.
And I've been a fan of bourbon for probably 25 years now.
Okay.
Now, the first time I had a bourbon is a topic we should not discuss.
Okay. I like to ask it, but not everyone can tell the story.
Well, let's just say I was young and I didn't know, and it was a bourbon type beverage from another state, and it didn't leave a good impression in my mouth.
Okay.
And it took me a while to get over it.
Recover from that.
Yes, it was not pleasant, but I love the taste of bourbon. I love the aroma of bourbon. I love the history. I love the stories from the different distilleries. There's so much wrapped into our industry, and I've been a fan for probably about 25 years.
Nice.
So how I got into bourbon was I started out as a chemical engineer at University of California, Davis, and it turns out that they have winemaking programs there, and they have beer making programs. So I started making beer as a hobby, and then I found out there was a beer making program. So I made beer for 2 years as a hobby, fell in love with the art and the science of it. I worked at 4 wineries while I was a student. After college, I took a job at a major brewery, worked there for over 25 years, in a dozen locations, traveled around the world, traveled domestically, had raw material responsibilities, technical responsibilities, new project responsibilities. Was eventually a senior brewmaster at one of their larger breweries in Georgia, and I left that position in 2014, became the technical director for another very well-known craft brewer, and I was in charge of raw materials and R&D and sensory and brewing and quality, and it was about that time that Sazerac reached out to me, and we started talking, and it made sense. It just made a lot of sense. And to put that in perspective, we make beer that feeds the still.
Right.
And the day I showed up, I could walk around and I immediately understood the process.
Sure.
Because we have grain handling. I know what grain quality is. I spent many years studying that. I know how mills work. I know how grains transferred from one point to another. I know how mashing works, or cooking, as we call it here, where you're converting starch into sugar. And the pumps that we use, and the heat exchangers, and the steam application, all of that is what is in a brewery.
Right.
So my first day here, I was immediately comfortable with what we were doing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've actually heard some people say that they think that some of the best master distillers are former brewmasters, because they just have that base of knowledge about fermentation, and that's so important with what you're putting through the still, what you're going to get on the back end, and what's going to affect the flavor.
Well, that's right. I mean, if you think about it, when I talk about bourbon, I talk about the levers I can pull for flavor.
Right.
And it's the grain bill, the quality of the grain, the freshness of the grain, how we cook the grains, not just how much sugar we're creating. When you cook, you're converting starch into sugar, but there's also flavor reactions happening. And then fermentation is where the major flavor components are produced. And all the still does is remove them.
Right.
Or concentrate them, or it helps make the final product, and then of course the aging process. But up to that point of the still, we are making beer, and that has been really valuable for my approach here.
So now that you're at this level of knowledge about whiskey, what's one of the largest misconceptions that you had about whiskey before you really got into the technical details?
Wow, largest misconception. I don't know if I had a lot of misconceptions. There isn't as much science research being done in distillation as I would have thought.
Okay.
That might have been one.
One of the things that shocked you?
I don't know if it shocked me, but I was a little surprised by it. There's not as much research being done that there is in maybe some other beverages.
Right.
But again, the vast majority of what we make is beer, so a lot of that research is applicable.
Right, right. So as the master distiller of such an enormous and well-known, well-respected brand, are you surprised at all at the celebrity nature of the master distiller position?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah?
I did a little bit of that in my prior life, but I think what it speaks to, and it's not an area that I'm overly comfortable in.
Right, sure.
I like running the distillery. I'm a scientist, I'm an artist. That's how I like to look at my job. I make bourbon. I'm very happy when I taste a honey barrel, when I get a honey barrel. One of those barrels that stand out. I mean, they're all good, but some of them are exceptional. So that makes me happy. Making process improvements makes me happy. So I'm a little uncomfortable about that celebrity status, but I've come to grips with it. I'm actually very comfortable, because what that does is it speaks to the passion of our consumers.
Right.
And they love what we do. And I can only feel good about that. I appreciate it and I enjoy it now, as long as it's not all I do. And the vast majority of what I do is here in the distillery. But I appreciate it. I appreciate our consumers, because that's, again, just a bunch of passion that they're letting go.
So I don't think I've ever told anybody this before, but the first bottle of bourbon I ever bought in my entire life was a 1792.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Small batch?
It would have had to have been, yeah.
Yes.
It would have had to have been. This was, I don't know, I was probably 28 and I'm 42 now, so this was a good bit ago.
Yeah. You don't still have it, do you?
No, I drank it. I mean, I didn't know. I went on a trip and I didn't start drinking until I was about 28, and I tried a lot of different things, and one of the things that I tried that I really liked was bourbon. And when I ordered it, I said, give me a bourbon. I didn't say, give me this brand. I didn't know.
Right.
So I just went into the store and I walked through and I was looking at all the labels, and the 1792 bottle caught my eye. And that was the one I bought. And I took it home and I drank it. It probably took me a year, because I wasn't, I didn't drink that much back then. But first bottle with whiskey I ever bought was the 1792.
Great, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so, do you remember the first time somebody asked for your autograph?
I do.
Were you just like, okay, we're doing this?
Well, yeah, it was, like I said, it was I guess it's a little humbling, but again, I don't look at it as they want my autograph as much as they want the autograph of the master distiller of the brand.
Right.
So,
yeah, that makes sense.
But as I have been around a little longer, and as I meet people, they tend to know a little bit more about me.
Yeah.
And it does become a little more personal.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the history of 1792, when you started production, things like that.
This distillery has been around a long time. It is the oldest continually operating distillery in Bardstown for sure, and probably a wider range.
Okay.
We go back, Mattingly and Moore were some of the early owners and founders of the distillery, and it goes back to the mid 1800s, but I believe we've been producing here since 1897.
Okay.
And we cannot show your viewers that now, but if you look at the front of our distillery, it's kind of mosaic that talks to different years. I've got one section of our boiler room that was built pre-1900.
Wow.
And then a section above it and over to the side was in the 1920s. And then the remainder of it was brick facing that was from the 1940s. So we have, really an amazing history at this distillery.
Yeah. So was there production during Prohibition?
There was not.
Okay, so this location was shut down.
Was shut down during Prohibition, and we started up very, very soon after Prohibition.
Gotcha. Okay. So I think people, and honestly, I think it varies per brand what the duties of a master distiller are. What percentage of your time do you get to spend doing that, chemical engineering, actually making process improvements and things? And what percentage of your time is like brand ambassador, travel, things like that?
Yes, brand ambassador, pretty small, but there's always that pull. People always want to do it. I probably travel off-site probably just 4 times a year.
Okay.
I do a lot of local stuff, in the evenings and on the weekends. I still have my day job, but I do very little brand ambassador stuff. So the vast majority of my responsibilities are the well-being of the distillery and the warehouse operation, because that's what I oversee. And in the distillery, it's grain in to juice out, but it's also the dry house where we dry our spent grains, and also the boiler operation where our water comes into the facility and we filter it and we create steam. Those are a couple things we do there. So yes, I do a lot of day-to-day stuff, but I think more importantly than me overseeing every detail, because we are a 24/6 operation. I've got a staff, and a big part of what I do is help to develop and train them so that we are working towards our common goal. Got a lot of people here that are very passionate about what we do. I certainly do not do it all. I oversee the departments, and I've got probably the technical knowledge that I can share. My policies are set up based on making great tasting bourbon. So it's really a team effort, but the vast majority of what I do has to do with how we are running our distillery today, but also looking into the future and some of the things that we're going to do moving forward.
That's awesome. So I like to say that bourbon brings people together, and some of my greatest memories have been created around people that I've met and experiences I've had with bourbon. What would be maybe your top 1 or 2 experiences that you've had because you're master distiller of such a great, well-known brand?
Oh boy!
And do you mind if I try this guy?
Oh, absolutely not. Let's. I think we got another couple glasses here too.
Yeah, we do.
If you don't mind, I'll even pour it for you.
Awesome.
I geek out on understanding what we do. People ask me, is it art or science? And I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think that I like to look at it as we're using scientific principles as our tools to our art, and it's really important to understand these things.
I'm sorry, this bourbon just like boom.
Let's talk about it for a little bit. Yeah, I didn't give you any warning, but this is a barrel. This is frankly lower proof than I would expect coming out of a barrel. This was put in a barrel in 2007.
Is this finished?
And it was pulled out of a barrel probably about a year ago. It's is it finished? No, it's not finished. Meaning, was it put in another barrel?
Another barrel?
It was not, no.
Oh my God. Guys, you got to try this. There's people off camera you can't see. Wow, what is that?
So this is a standard mash bill bourbon, our standard high rye mash bill bourbon, and it comes from warehouse Y, and it's about middle of the height. It's not the high end. It's not at the low end.
Age, roughly?
This one would be 11 years old.
Okay.
When it was pulled out, yeah.
So what's different to me about this is it's got all of those classic flavors that I'm used to, but in the mid palate, I'm getting a sweet cereal flavor.
Okay.
Like, and sometimes I get this flavor on fake whiskeys, and so I don't mean like that. This is a complexity. This isn't a fake flavor, but it's got a little bit of a Captain Crunch sweet cereal flavor in the mid palate that just is knocking my socks off. I'm like really enjoying it.
There's a lot of really great stuff going on.
I mean, there's the richness of this is phenomenal.
So I get, and again, just because we're tasting the 12-year next to it, what I get out of this is a lot of aged stone fruits. You know, ripe cherries, apricots. That's what I get out of a bourbon that's been aged a long time. There's a lot of oxidation that takes place in the barrel. And to me, that's what defines a really well-made bourbon. I love these flavors. This tastes also pretty strong. I mean,
this tastes more like if you took cherries and apricots and you like did some sort of a reduction to it.
Yeah.
Like they were cooked.
Oh yeah.
You know?
And that's accelerated oxidation.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
absolutely.
It's very
There's
interesting.
a lot going on.
A little bit of coffee note in there too, though. Some dark chocolate, very, very interesting.
So it's a barrel sample, it's unfiltered. So, you know, you're going to get a little bit of stuff in there that we normally wouldn't get, which just...
which is how we like our bourbon.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Straight from the barrel. Well, unfortunately, I think we're running out of time, so I will ask you one last question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
So, what do you hope to see in the future of 1792?
Yes.
Do we want increased capacity? Do we want increased brand loyalty? Like, if you could wave a magic wand, what would be the future of 1792 with you at its head as the master distiller?
Yeah, that could be a very, very long answer, but I'll give it a stab.
A stab, okay.
You know, we make some really incredible stuff, and we've got a really incredible history. And first of all, my job is not to change the flavor profiles of 1792, but I think that what I have been able to do is make it more consistent. You know, in any process, there are some that are better than others.
Sure.
My job is to get them all to be as good as possible.
Right.
And I think that, you know, the search for perfection is endless.
Right.
So always trying to improve that is a plus. And we do a lot of little in-house experiments. How fast am I running my still? A couple degree different in fermentation temperature, and then we can check that distillate chemically and also sensorially to really hone in on what we want to do. So I will do that forever. That is what I like to do, always tweaking the process to make it better and better and better. I think that being said, this is an old distillery, and there's you know, a lot of little things we can do to improve our reliability and our capacity, and we're working on that. We're going down a good path right now. So, and I also want to sort of share whatever knowledge I have or I think I have with my staff, so that we can, you know, engage in those geeky discussions and you know, I mean, think about it. I get to make bourbon,
right?
And I get to taste what I make on a daily basis, and you know, I get excited and happy when I taste something really special. So I want to continue down that path, and by doing that, we make little discoveries, and we are able to make things a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of an endless road.
Well, I do have to say that in the last few years, I have seen a major shift in the whiskey nerd community to having a strong acceptance of 1792, particularly the foolproof releases, to the point now that when a whiskey noob posts a picture of a foolproof single barrel and they go, hey, has anybody tried this? The most common comment is, there's no bad 1792 foolproof, just buy it.
Yeah.
Right, just buy it. And it's become, honestly, my most common daily drinker.
Yeah.
Because luckily, you guys have a gigantic still here, and you're producing enough that I can still find it, and it's delicious. So I applaud you, sir, for all of your efforts that you put forward. If people want to have more of a 1792 experience, where can they find you? Social media, you know, visit, things like that.
Well, certainly I recommend the distillery.
Yeah.
We're a very genuine, industrial, gritty distillery, and it's a great tour. I hear nothing but great things about it. It doesn't cost either, and we do a tasting. So if you're in the neighborhood, visiting the distillery is important.
Yeah.
Social media, you know, maybe I'm giving a nod to my age and my acceptance of such things.
You don't know much about it.
Well, I know a lot about it. I'm just not fully engaged in it. But I did, recently open up my Instagram at Danny Kahn Bourbon.
Okay.
And it's in its infancy, and I post cool pictures once in a while.
All right.
So,
you heard it here first, people. Go to @DannyKahnBourbon, and you need to follow this guy because you're going to be getting the inside track of the pictures of the cool stuff that's coming out, and you don't want to miss out on that.
Yeah, so it's Kahn, Danny Kahn, Kahn.
Kahn.
And we're in the process of redoing some of our website and our Facebook page, so stay tuned because it will improve, it will get better.
Nice, nice. Well, if you want more information about Bourbon Real Talk, you can find us at Facebook, Instagram, YouTube /Bourbon Real Talk. You can search for us on your favorite podcast player. You can go to our website at bourbonrealtalk.com. And if you woke up this morning and you were unsure whether or not anyone loved you, just know that I love you. And I'll see you next time on Bourbon Real Talk. Cheers.
Cheers.